The night of November 13, 1974, began like any other in the quiet neighborhood of Amityville, Long Island. The streets were calm, the houses stood silent, and the air carried a sense of peace that only a small, close-knit community could offer. It was a night like countless others, where families felt safe within the walls of their homes, and the troubles of the world seemed far away. A light breeze rustled through the trees, whispering secrets to the night. The leaves danced gently, casting fleeting shadows on the ground as if nature itself was trying to communicate a warning that went unheard. Families settled in for the night, unaware of the darkness creeping towards 112 Ocean Avenue. Children were tucked into bed, parents relaxed in their living rooms, and the hum of everyday life filled the air. It was a scene of normalcy, of routine, of the mundane comforts that make up the fabric of suburban life. Inside the large Dutch colonial house, however, a storm was brewing. This was no ordinary storm, but one that would leave a permanent scar on the community. The house, with its distinctive gambrel roof and iconic windows, stood as a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy. It wasn't a storm of wind and rain, but one of madness and violence. Shadows moved inside the house, flickering lights hinted at the chaos within. The tranquility of the night was about to be shattered in the most horrific way imaginable. By morning, the quaint facade of the DeFeo family home would be shattered, revealing a scene of unimaginable horror. 6 lives brutally taken. The sun rose to illuminate a house that had become a crime scene, a place where innocence was lost, and nightmares became reality. One chilling question left hanging in the air: what happened inside 112 Ocean Avenue? The number 112, once just an address, now carried a weight of dread and mystery. It became a symbol of the inexplicable, a question mark that loomed over the town. Some say evil permeates the very foundation of that house. They speak of a malevolent force, an evil presence that drove the events of that night. The house, with its dark history, became a focal point for tales of the supernatural, of forces beyond human understanding. Others claim it was a tragic case of a family torn apart by their own demons. The DeFeo family, once seemingly perfect, had hidden cracks that widened into chasms of despair and violence. The fragmented family photo, a poignant reminder of what once was, now lay shattered, much like the lives it depicted. Tonight, we delve into the horrifying events of that fateful night. We examine the evidence, we explore the theories, the flashing lights of the police cars, the hushed whispers of the neighbors, all paint a picture of a community grappling with the unthinkable. We ask the question that has haunted this small town for decades: was it just a man, or was it something more sinister at play? The full moon cast an eerie glow on the house, as if nature itself was spotlighting the mystery that lay within. Get ready, because tonight, we're diving headfirst into the chilling truth behind the Amityville murders. We will peel back the layers of myth and reality to uncover the true story of what happened on that ordinary night that turned into an unthinkable horror. The DeFeo family seemed on the surface like any other. Patriarch Ronald DeFeo Jr. ruled with an iron fist. His wife Louise tried to keep the peace. They had 5 children: Ronald Jr., Butch, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John. However, behind the facade of normalcy, darkness festered. Ronald Sr. was known for his explosive temper and abusive behavior. The children lived in fear. Whispers of family secrets and simmering resentment followed them like shadows. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue, with its grand exterior and spacious rooms, should have been a haven. Instead, it became a pressure cooker. The family's dysfunction intensified within its walls. Neighbors reported shouting matches, doors slamming. Some even claimed to see fleeting figures in the windows, shadows moving just out of sight. Whether these were genuine paranormal occurrences or simply the product of an overactive imagination, one thing was clear: the DeFeo family harbored secrets, and those secrets would soon paint the walls of their home with blood. Around 3:15 a.m., the silence of the night was shattered by the roar of a .35 caliber Marlin rifle. The tranquility of the suburban neighborhood was abruptly replaced by a sense of dread and confusion. The stillness of the night, which had been a comforting blanket for the residents, was now a haunting reminder of the violence that had just occurred. 6 shots rang out, each one a nail in the coffin of the DeFeo family's fate. The echoes of the gunfire reverberated through the quiet streets, a grim symphony that marked the end of innocence for this peaceful community. Neighbors, startled from their sleep, would later recount the chilling sounds that pierced the night, unaware of the horror unfolding just a few houses away. Upstairs in their beds, Ronald Sr., Louise, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John were systematically executed. The family, who had once shared laughter and love within these walls, now lay lifeless, victims of an unimaginable act of violence. Each shot was a calculated move, a deliberate act that left no room for mercy or hesitation. Each family member was found lying face down, their dreams extinguished in a torrent of violence. The sight was a macabre tableau, a stark contrast to the warmth and safety that a home is supposed to provide. The positions of their bodies suggested a sudden, overwhelming force, one that left them no chance to react or escape. But amidst the carnage, there was an eerie absence, a struggle, a cry for help, any sign that the victims had tried to fight back. It was as if they had been caught in a nightmare from which they could not wake. The silence of their final moments was deafening, a void that spoke volumes about the terror they must have felt. It was as if they had accepted their gruesome fate. The lack of defensive wounds or signs of a struggle puzzled investigators, leading them to question the circumstances of the murders. How could an entire family be so easily subdued? What kind of fear or coercion had kept them from fighting back? The killer, as we know, was 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. A young man with a troubled past, Butch had a history of erratic behavior and conflicts with his family. Yet, no one could have predicted the extent of his rage or the cold-blooded nature of his actions that night. He would later claim that voices, demonic whispers urging him on, had driven him to commit the horrific act. These alleged voices, he said, had tormented him, pushing him to the brink of sanity. Whether these claims were a desperate attempt to explain the inexplicable or a genuine glimpse into his disturbed mind, they added a chilling layer to an already horrifying story. But the calculated precision of the murders, the lack of any struggle, painted a different picture. It suggested a level of premeditation and control that was at odds with the idea of a man driven to madness by unseen forces. The methodical nature of the killings indicated a mind that was disturbingly clear and focused on its deadly mission. The scene suggested a cold-blooded execution, not a fit of madness. The evidence pointed to a deliberate, calculated act of violence, one that required planning and a chilling detachment from the humanity of his victims. This was not the work of a man in the throes of a psychotic break, but rather someone who had made a conscious decision to end the lives of those closest to him. As investigators combed through the blood-soaked bedrooms, they were left with a chilling question. What could drive a son to annihilate his entire family in such a calculated, merciless manner? The answers, if they existed, were buried deep within the twisted psyche of Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., a young man whose actions would forever haunt the quiet streets of this once peaceful neighborhood. The sun rose on a scene of unimaginable horror. The quiet suburban neighborhood, usually a picture of tranquility, was now the epicenter of a gruesome crime that would shock the nation. The DeFeo family home, once a symbol of the American dream, had become a house of nightmares. The early morning light did little to dispel the darkness that had settled over the town. Butch DeFeo Jr., seemingly unfazed by the carnage he had orchestrated, went about his day with a chilling normalcy. His demeanor was disturbingly calm, as if the events of the previous night had no bearing on his conscience. He walked through the suburban streets, his expression blank, his mind seemingly elsewhere. To the casual observer, he was just another young man starting his day. He clocked in for work, acted surprised by the news of his family's demise, and even joined the throng of onlookers gathering at the crime scene. His performance was almost theatrical, a macabre play where he was both the actor and the audience. He mingled with the crowd, his face a mask of feigned shock and sorrow. But beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding. His performance, however, was unconvincing. Those who knew him sensed something was off. His reactions were too calculated, his emotions too rehearsed. The unease in his eyes betrayed the facade he was trying so hard to maintain. It was as if he was playing a role he hadn't fully prepared for, and the cracks were beginning to show. His stories were inconsistent, riddled with holes and contradictions. Each time he recounted the events, the details changed. One moment he was a helpless witness, the next a reluctant participant. The authorities, trained to detect deception, quickly picked up on the discrepancies. His narrative was like a poorly woven tapestry, threads of truth and lies tangled together in a confusing mess. The police, their suspicions piqued by his erratic behavior, began to suspect that Butch knew more than he was letting on. They observed him closely, noting every nervous twitch, every hesitant pause. The more he spoke, the deeper he seemed to dig himself into a hole. His attempts to mislead only served to tighten the net around him. As the day wore on, Butch's facade crumbled. The weight of his lies became too much to bear. His confident exterior gave way to visible distress. He was no longer the composed young man who had started the day. The reality of his actions was beginning to catch up with him, and it showed in every strained expression, every anxious glance. He changed his story multiple times, first claiming to have witnessed the murders, then confessing to killing his father in self-defense before finally admitting to the murders of his entire family. Each version of events differed wildly from the last, adding another layer to the already convoluted case. His shifting narratives were a desperate attempt to find a version that would absolve him, but instead, they only served to incriminate him further. Each version of events differed wildly from the last, adding another layer to the already convoluted case. The investigators were left sifting through a web of deceit, trying to piece together the truth from the fragments of Butch's conflicting accounts. His agitation grew with each retelling, the pressure of maintaining his lies becoming increasingly unbearable. With each lie, each inconsistency, Butch tightened the noose around his own neck. His desperation was palpable, his attempts to control the narrative slipping through his fingers like sand. The more he tried to manipulate the story, the more entangled he became in his own web of deceit. The police watched as he unraveled, their suspicions turning into certainty. The police, armed with a mountain of evidence and a confession riddled with inconsistencies, were certain. Butch DeFeo Jr. was their man. They had the physical evidence, the witness statements, and now, a series of confessions that, despite their contradictions, pointed to one undeniable truth. Butch was guilty. The case against him was solidifying, the pieces falling into place. But what they couldn't understand was the why. What could drive a man to commit such an unspeakable act against his own family? The motive remained elusive, a dark shadow over the case. The investigators were left grappling with the psychological puzzle, trying to comprehend the mind of a killer. The why was a question that gnawed at them, a piece of the puzzle that refused to fit. What drove him to commit such an act of unspeakable evil? Was it a moment of madness, a lifetime of resentment, or something even darker? The answers were not forthcoming, and the more they delved into Butch's past, the more questions they uncovered. The house, now a symbol of horror, stood as a silent witness to the events that had transpired within its walls. That question, like a specter, would continue to haunt the investigation. The search for answers would lead them down dark paths, exploring the depths of human nature and the capacity for evil. The case of Butch DeFeo Jr. was not just a story of a crime, but a journey into the heart of darkness, a reminder of the thin line between sanity and madness.